In today's episode, we will be moving our data, the dummy list of messages, out of the application to an external place. And the reason is that right now, the data is inside one of our classes. It's hard-coded because we just put it inside a variable, and whenever you want to change something, the content of this variable, of this list, you need to go here to this class. You need to either add, remove, or change one of the entries. And then you need to recompile the whole application so the changes are displayed. What we want to achieve is we want to have data separated from the application. So whenever data changes, you don't need to rebuild your application. However, the data will be changed, the display of the data will be changed inside your app. And at this point, I will be using a simple file. So we will move this data to a file, and then the application will be reading from the file to display the list of messages. Okay, so the first step would be to change the structure of this data, because right now it's just a list of strings. And it would be better to reshape it a little bit, to give it more structure. What I mean by that is this line of text is the title. So instead of using a list of strings, let's explicitly distinguish each part of the message. Let's say that there is a subject, that there is a body, and then there is, let's say, a date, something of that sort. Well, let's stick to these two maybe for starters. So this data structure, let me just quickly finish. And so this data structure between the curly braces is called a map in Dart. In other programming languages, you may know this as a dictionary or as a hash table or associative array. And the idea is that we collect between those curly braces pairs of a key and a value. So we say that subject for this message is this, and the body is this, and potentially there are other fields that we can define. We will define them later. For now, it's just about giving this data a little bit more structure. So let's repeat that process for other messages. So my second message, let me just do this. Third one. So now we need to change the way it's displayed. So here we no longer get a string, we get a map. It's a message, and from this message, let's access the subject, and here let's access the message body. So it works. So I will just increase slightly the length of this parameter. Okay, it's good. So as you can see, the first message has 4 lines. I would like to quickly show you how you can use the text widget to manipulate, to change the formatting or other attributes. So in this case, I will say that max line is 2, and when I save, as you can see, it reduces the number of lines, even though the message is, the body of this particular message is longer. What I can do else is that I can say, let's go ahead and go inside this widget, and there is this parameter called overflow, and let's use this. So overflow, text overflow ellipsis. So right now, as you can see in the first message, it adds 3 dots because to indicate that there is more text. So there are other attributes, and feel free to explore it. Okay, so we have the structure done, and now let's move this data out to a file. In Flutter, there is a configuration file called pubspec YAML. And YAML is this format where you use keys and values, similar to map data structure. And there is a small addition to that. When you want to express that something is a part of something else, you nest this key inside. So you use it. What I mean is that you use indentation for nesting. And there is a caveat that you should always be consistent with the indentation. So you should always use the same length for the indentation, and you should always use the same, you must use the same character. So you have 2 characters you can use for indentation. It's a space and a tab. So if you use tabs, always use tabs, and if you use spaces, always use spaces. So there's a few sections in this configuration file: name, description, environment, dependencies, and there is, at the end, there is a section called just Flutter. And inside this section, there is a subsection called assets. And here you can define files that you can reference from your application. So usually these are images or other media, and you just need to define the paths that are relative to the project's root. So in our case, we will create a directory called data, and inside we will put a file called messages.json. So right now, when I save, it says that this asset doesn't exist. So let's go ahead and create it. So I already created the data directory. And inside this directory, let's create message.json. So let's just put an empty array. And now I just need to refresh the file by changing it and saving again. And if everything is okay, the error message will disappear. So it finds the file. Okay, so let's go ahead and open this file. And now I will move this part out of this class, and let's put it here. So it says that the property keys must be double quotes. So let's quickly change this to double quotes here, 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 and here. Okay. So that's done, and now the message is empty. The list disappears. So the next step is to let's refactor this code. So right now we have one file, main Dart, and we have 2 classes. That's not ideal. So I will move one of those classes to a separate file. So let's call it a message list Dart. And here let's take this class, this whole class, oops, and let's put it here. So now it complains that it cannot find the class. VS Code is smart enough to suggest me that I can import this class from a file I just created, the message list inside our project. So let's just click that, and it adds the proper import. And now it complains that there is some problem here. So let's solve that. So again, let's use VS Code. We are using material. So it's good, and here it's good. Okay. So the list is still empty. There is one minor thing. We should rename our class. But before we do that, I no longer want to use a stateless widget. I want to use a stateful widget. So Let's change this widget to a stateful widget. Let's see. So we need to create a create state method, and we need to create the state. So now I'm creating the state, and I'm saying it will be for the message list. So I just need to rename it to be consistent. So my widget will be called message list. It's a stateful widget, and I'm creating a state for this message list widget here. So inside this widget, as we said before at the beginning, the build method is it is inside the state class. So I will just go copy that here. Okay, along with the state. Let's remove this. And here let's create the message list state. So the title is just set once. So it's marked as final. So we can leave it here, and we just need to create a constructor for that. So we will use VS Code to do it automatically for us. So this widget is pretty much done, and everything else will happen inside the state class we just created. So we have small error here. The title is no longer available within the scope of the class, because we are now using two classes, the widget and its state. So if we use this state message list construction, there's a getter called widget, just widget, and we can just type widget, and it will reference the other class from the pair. So inside the state, we can reference this other class fields using widget dot and the name of the field. So that's that, and it looks good. So there is an error. Let me quickly see what's the problem here. Okay, we didn't change the name. Yeah, it works. So before we go any further, let's go to the settings in VS Code, and let's type Dart or Flutter, maybe Flutter. And here in this section called Dart Flutter Debugger Restart Behavior, be sure that you have hot restart selected and not hot reload. Okay, hot restart. Okay, so right now the message list is empty. It's extracted to a file. So what's left is to just read the file and display the message as before. So in order to do that, we will create a method called load message list, and here we will use something called root bundle load string. And let's use VS Code again to suggest us a proper. So root bundle is a predefined name. VS Code is again smart enough to know what I mean by that. So it will import the proper package from the core Flutter library. And this package allows us to load a file as a string. So we are just doing that. But to read a file, we cannot just say root bundle load a string. We need to await this operation. And why is that? Because when you're accessing a file, or for example, fetching something from the network, it is a long operation in a sense that for you it's quick. You don't really see the difference. But for your computer, it's very, very long compared to other operations. And let's maybe just switch a little bit the screen right now and to show you some information about the latency. So what is latency? Latency is the delay between the moment you request something and the moment you get something. And here there is this guy who created a list of, he compared the latency for operation inside your computer. So you have like this processor memory called L1 cache, which is very, very fast. There's another cache called L2, which is slightly longer to request information, to data from that. Then you have the main memory, getting something from the network, reading something from an SSD file, etc. So you can just compare those numbers, but there's another guy who created some kind of analogy between those numbers in nanoseconds and our measures of time, like a human measures of time, I would say. So like a minute, hour, and day. So in our case, when we request something from the memory, when our message list was inside the class, it was inside the memory, and requesting that data to display it was in hundreds of seconds, of nanoseconds, and in this analogy it's seconds, so it's a few minutes. And to compare that with accessing something from a disk, so it's disk seek. So when we read something from a disk, it's 16 weeks. So as you can see, we are comparing minutes to weeks. That's the difference for your computer. And here it's in a proper unit. The memory reference is in hundreds of nanoseconds, let's say, and the disk seek is in millions of nanoseconds. So the difference is huge for your computer. So let's switch back. And as you can see, when you're reading something from your disk, you're doing this disk seek, and it takes a lot of time. It's weeks for your computer. So it can do other things. And for that reason, you need to await for this operation. And when you say await, it means that Flutter will stop at this point and do something else. And when this data is available, when the weeks has passed, the content will be ready for you, and then the execution will resume in the next line here. So when we print the content, it will be ready. So await stops this at this point, and after a few weeks, it prints our content. So let's see if it works. We need to invoke this inside init state. So it happens when the widget is created. And let's just call this here. So now in debug, when I restart the application, I should see the content. So again, this happens like right away, but for your computer it's not that fast. So this line displays the content, and as you can see, we managed to display it successfully. But the content is just a string, because we are loading the data from this file as a string, and this is not JSON, so this is not a structure. It's just characters between quotes. So in order to change that, we need to convert this string to a proper JSON structure, and we will use another library that comes with Flutter, that's inside the core library called JSON, and we will take this content from the file and we will decode it. So the collection will be the proper will be a structure, a JSON structure. So there's again an error. I can use VS Code smartness to get me what I want. So it knows I want Dart convert. And now collection should have the data in the proper shape. So the last thing is to just assign messages, this new collection to messages. But as you can remember, I cannot just do the assign. I need to say explicitly to Flutter, listen, I need to change this variable called messages. So I'm pressing this enter on my desk in my real estate agency. In other words, I'm using set state, and I'm just saying messages equals collection. And now, if everything goes well, I should have the list of messages again. So nothing really changed. But now I can just go to the file, and let's say I can create another entry. Another entry from JSON. So I save this. I need to refresh, and the content appears. So that's pretty much it. We have our data extracted to a JSON file, and we are almost ready to fetch it over the network. Stay tuned for the next episodes.